I am Alfie Williams,
And I'm Rodney McGee.
and this is Rodney and Alfie Talk Metal. You're going to have to forgive us this week for the lack of our beautiful faces, or our mugs, as some people like to say it. Unfortunately, we have some technical issues this week, but next week we should be right back on track, and you can have us full screen, HD, and all of that beautiful jazz. This week, we want to talk about, well, a little bit late in the news now, is the appearance of Master of Puppets on Stranger Things. I kind of feel like, well, I was extremely surprised to see Metallica on a mainstream Netflix program in one of the key, I guess you would say, final battles of Stranger Things. I guess, spoiler warning, just in case, if you haven't seen the last episodes of Stranger Things, we're going to be dipping into that, but more into the music side of things. What was your initial reactions, Rodney, of hearing Master of Puppets on a mainstream show such as Stranger Things?
I think I was more surprised about their choice just because they're very much about bringing back that sound and feel of the 80s. And up until now, that's very much been like synth pop, new wave, that type of thing. And so it seems like they kind of broke ranks with this one. And for a lot of people, you know, something like Master of Puppets or thrash metal or something isn't the 80s to them. You know, it
No.
wasn't radio material. So, you know, they grew up with, or, you know, when they think back to it, Madonna and, you know,
Yeah.
Psychedelic Furs and Howard Jones and Whitney Houston, you know, all these bands like that. So having a band that's, you know, that at the time, you know, it's hard for us to think of it that way now, but at the time, even on Master of Puppets, was a bit more underground. That was interesting to me. But I think it kind of fit, you know, the character and the whole thing. It's like the D&D kids and
Yeah.
this guy being a metalhead and everything. Yeah, he would be tuned into that. So I thought it was a good choice for the character and things. I wasn't exactly sure why they chose to change it up a little bit. They kind of created like a weird medley and changed some things about the
Yeah.
music. But you know, I guess it made sense and everything. I was appreciative that after seeing some interviews and stuff with the actor who played Eddie, that he genuinely got into it. Like he threw himself into it and became like really dedicated into that song and stuff, and really, you know, put some effort into trying to make it authentic. So hats off to him. But yeah, I was more surprised by that choice because of that. That I thought if they were going to use music or something to draw these monsters or something, it would be far more something in line with the rest of the music you usually hear on it.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, something like that. Or maybe a more hair metal that doesn't exist uh type of thing, or you know, something maybe more pop that people would have remembered, like a Round and Round from Rat or something like that, something that would have been more in the public consciousness or had a lot of MTV exposure or something. Remember at that time MTV was king and there's no Master of Puppets video.
No.
So that, yeah, it set me back a little bit, but I thought they did it well, and it was a good choice. It felt authentic for the time, and it felt like what this guy would have done as like his, you know, this is when I really riff out type of choice, you know, because that was the song at the time. If you could downpick your way through Master of Puppets, you were a badass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was well done all the way around. It was pretty cool.
I liked it for one. I don't have any bad takes on it as such. I rewatched the scene again prior to our call now. I'm kind of going to say the same thing as you, where I think the choice was a bit odd. It didn't fit. it's hard to explain. It just, like you said, at that time, Metallica wouldn't have been popular in many circles. So to have them, I don't know, it just seemed like a strange choice.
But I think
And
that is what made it a good choice. I think it was odd for them to recognize it,
mhm,
that this was the right choice, because these guys were the rejects.
yeah,
These are kind of the delinquents, and the kids, like I said, into D&D and being nerds and weird. That's who was into Metallica back when they were still underground.
mhm,
Not, it wasn't the commercial choice, and it probably would have seemed weird if a reject like Eddie decided to pick up something way more mainstream.
yeah. No, I guess that sort of makes sense in line with his character. What else was I gonna say? I mean, I love the whole thing with his character. Like every scene you see him, there's like an 8-string BC Rich in the background, and he's got different guitars. And I think you and I can identify with someone like that. And just sort of taking a different take on the conversation. There's not many, I guess, metalhead type characters in film and video these days. Again, it sort of goes back to our subculture conversations where everything is so branched out. It's sort of like you don't have to be in your own subculture anymore. You can just pick and choose what you want. And that's a detriment to these cultures, which you and I strive for to try and keep talking about and keep look after, and in a word, gatekeep to a certain degree. But bringing it back to the show, yeah, I guess when you put it that way, it does make sense in tune with the character and the story. I thought it was a bit strange to put the structure in a weird order. I'm so used to it in my head being a certain way. I don't know if this is a musician's thing or how I remember it. I just remember how the song goes and how the parts fall in line with each other. So to break it up, and I think they put the bridge after the verse and stuff like that, and then the solo. Did you find that a bit disorientating? Did you have any thoughts on why that was a deliberate choice, or was it just more of a thematic choice to match the pictures on screen?
Yeah, that's, like I touched on a little earlier, that kind of stuff struck me as odd, like why they would feel the need to do that. But I guess, and there's some parts in it which aren't actually Master of Puppets. It's slightly different. If you listen to it, some of the guitar overlays that were recorded, they're not accurate to the song.
No.
Uh, so those were the pieces where I was a bit, huh? The most.
Did you hear that parts of the song were re-recorded by Ty Trujillo?
Yeah, I did.
So that's probably well, again that's sort of a strange choice. I'm perfectly happy with Master of Puppets being in Stranger Things. I find it a bit weird to re-record parts and I don't know, modernize it a bit, or maybe that's the reason why those parts are in different orders, just to sort of give him a chance to shine. I found that in particular a weirder choice. I'm struggling to accept that more than I am Master of Puppets in Stranger Things.
Yeah, yeah, that struck me as odd. I don't know. Maybe they felt having something that was able to be stretched out in one part, or just maybe they felt one section couldn't be cut up into a small piece and used
Hmm.
that well by itself. Who knows? Uh, I've seen some of the dumbest decisions I've ever seen in my life made in, you know, Hollywood boardrooms. Uh, but uh, yeah, I mean, it didn't upset me that much. I mean, it's
No.
being used for this thing, but yeah, as far as that goes, I think it was cool. My biggest hope for it, excuse me, is just that we get the same type of effect, maybe that we have with the Kate Bush song or something, is that
Hmm.
instead of it just being this novelty moment, that it opens the door for a few people,
Yeah, totally.
you know? to discover something because, let's face it, it's when something becomes fashionable or cool is when people feel okay about getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hoping some people will kind of go down the rabbit hole with it and discover some other stuff rather than it being kind of the TikTok song of the moment or something. And it's, the novelty thing. And then,
Just a meme.
next week, something else shiny,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully. I mean, as far as I'm aware, it's picked up again in the charts, or it had done after the show debuted. I'm not quite sure how charts work. I don't particularly pay them attention, but from what I hear, it has a resurgence. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. It's been getting downloaded and streamed like huge numbers. So, yeah, hopefully, and some other people will check out the whole album and, maybe get into it. But, as with anything, there's a novelty factor to it and hey, this is in
A water
type of
cooler
thing.
moment.
Yeah, totally.
I can see that probably being. I would imagine, if you have to ask me, like in numbers, 2/3 or 3/4 would consider it a water cooler moment, and then the remainder would probably be, oh, this is cool, and get into it. Probably, I don't know.
Yeah, which is fine with me because,
Yeah, I mean, that's enough.
well, not just that, but, those people who would be into it for that shorter period or anything, you're not the ones who belong here anyway.
No, that's right.
As we've talked
You're
about.
here for life.
Yeah. Blood in, blood out.
Were there any original soundtracks that had an effect on you with metal? Like, were any bands that stood out to you that debuted as an OST?
Well, that's an interesting topic because I think this kind of says something, and what an avenue for promotion that used to be really important for metal isn't really around anymore. And that's especially through the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Metal was, especially for action movies, horror movies, anything with a real bombastic piece to it, having a metal band or a metal song on the soundtrack, that could make or break you right there.
Mm.
And although it's cool to see, older artists like Kate Bush or, Metallica or something, people go back and find them, newer metal bands, this used to be a place where, you would put on lesser known bands. And that would be part of the soundtrack. And then people would get jacked about a new song. It kind of, because we cannibalize everything now, it used to be that it was something new that you heard on a soundtrack and people were like, oh, I saw the movie, loved the song, now I got to find out about the artist.
Mm.
Rather than I saw the movie, remember that song? And then we go down the memberberry thing. But yeah, I can remember a couple, and if you really think about it, or if you had an awareness in the 90s of the soundtracks of pop culture movies and stuff, man, there was a ton of metal all over it. I mean, you look at things like the Spawn soundtrack,
Mm-hmm.
where they did crossovers with electronic artists and metal guys. You had stuff like Judgment Night, where same type of thing. You had a ton of those different things. But two that I can remember off the top of my head where I discovered someone. One was, do you remember, as I say, do you remember? And then I'm completely blanking on the damn name thing. Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
Yeah. They did like a 3-movie series that was just called Tales from the Crypt, something
Okay.
and something. And the only thing that made it Tales from the Crypt was you had the narrator guy at the beginning.
I remember the scully dude
Yeah.
who was in the crypt as it goes. Yes.
And then, the movie came in. One of the movies they did was called Demon Night. And if you're actually into B horror, you could do worse than that movie.
Mhm.
It's got some cool stuff in it. It's got some really funny parts in it, actually, some really good humor. It's got some pretty dark moments, some, cool, just what you want to see out of horror. It's an interesting
Yeah.
little story and everything. But that was the first time I heard the song Hey Man, Nice Shot from Filter.
Mhm.
Never heard of Filter, never heard of that song. When I heard that bass intro to that song start while this guy's ripping down the road in his car, I'm going, oh, I got to have this. This is just, I utterly discovered that band through that movie. And, it turned out, I still like Filter to this day. But that was an important discovery piece.
Yeah.
And then that song got picked up for a number of other things. I remember it being in X-Files. I think there's like one other I can remember where they used that. It just suits soundtracks well. Another one I remember, and the funny thing is, I went to see the movie because of a song I heard in the trailer that they played on TV.
Oh, right. What was it?
Well, then, ironically, the song never gets used in the movie. There was a movie called The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp. It was like an occult, mystery type of thing.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the trailer, they used the song Denial from Seven Dust.
Mhm.
Never heard of Seven Dust? Denial is still the best song and riff they have ever written to me. I heard that riff come in and I was like, holy shit. I was like, I got to find out who this is. Intentionally went to see the movie to try and find out who this band was, and then they never played the song in the movie or had it on the credits. So I had to track this thing down. But again, a placement in another, artistic venue. And that's where, I picked up something about a new band. And I can remember that happening a lot, that, metal bands would get new exposure, or sometimes you would even break a new band by doing that. And it doesn't seem like that's really a thing anymore. Even action films, they're not bringing out newer or underground or interesting type of metal stuff to go with it, because it seems like it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got other thoughts to go on it, but do you remember that type of stuff
Oh,
coming up in
definitely.
movies that had that in it?
Yeah, I just want to go back to your point. This is something that's always bothered me with soundtracks. You'd have the soundtrack. The one that comes to mind for me, I don't know why, I haven't even seen the film, is Queen of the Damned, the vampire flick with,
Okay.
I can't remember what it's called now. That famous lady who died. It doesn't matter. But the point is, you have the OST, but like you say, the songs aren't in the film. And I was just like, why are these songs on an OST if they're not being played? And I think this leads into, I think I have the answer. If you're Warner Brothers and you have your film company and your music company, you can just say, well, I'm going to use my artists to populate the OST. And it's sort of like, it's another vehicle for you to sell your music, and vice versa. It sort of makes your music fans pay attention to the film, and film fans pay attention to the music you have in your back catalog. That's one theory I have about how that come about.
Mm-hmm.
But you're totally right on the money about action films and metal. I mean, I'm looking at a list now because I had to jog my memory, and I'm seeing Guns N' Roses, You Could Be Mine, Terminator 2.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time I ever heard Guns N' Roses, You Could Be Mine. I fucking love that song. That's one of my favorite Guns N' Roses songs. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Megadeth, Angry Again on The Last Action Hero. First time I ever heard Megadeth.
Wow.
What else is here? Let's see. My Plague from Slipknot on Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid and Slipknot were becoming more, I don't want to say mainstream, but getting more well known, they were controversial. Like parents, not my parents as such, but the devil thing, the masks and the horror aspect, they freaked people out. They freaked out the normies. And I was a little bit hesitant to go, oh, what's this Slipknot thing? And I enjoyed the Resident Evil film, pretty good film at the time. I really liked My Plague, and that got me into Slipknot. And again, these horror action movies go hand in hand. And the last one, I Disappear by Metallica. When Mission Impossible come out, I said to my friend, "Oh, do you like that? Do you like the Limp Bizkit song that's on Mission Impossible?" "No, I don't really like Limp Bizkit. I prefer the heavier one." I said, "Oh, what's that?" "Metallica." So, ooh. So like all of this stuff, like I do have memories of this now that we're talking about it. And I think it's just the zeitgeist. We don't have action movies that are bombastic and fun. And I think going back to a point you said a couple of weeks ago, I think in terms of like Judas Priest and stuff like that, the type of metal that you were referring to is to put your boots on and kick ass. And metal isn't like that anymore. It's a bit more self-indulgent and, for lack of a better term, whiny in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
And films, I guess there's just a mismatch between the character of films and the voice or the message of music, especially metal music. So I don't think they match up. But in the 80s and the mid 90s, you had, The Last Action Hero comes to mind. It's stupid. It's just stupid fun action, and it goes well with Megadeth and AC/DC and all of this stuff. It works. That wouldn't work now with, what's that one that they had? They bring out all the old um all the old heroes, Bruce Willis, Stallone, and Schwarzenegger.
Oh, I know what you mean,
You
but
know
I
the
can't
one.
think of it.
It was not the Avengers, it's something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you wouldn't see Megadeth on there.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit. It's just not. I think it takes itself too seriously, even though it's supposed to be a retro, um, a retrospective, laughing kind of movie. I don't know, but it feels like it doesn't. It takes itself too seriously still, even though it's trying too hard. Um, yeah, so I just think the messages don't fit anymore. That films are saying one thing, and music doesn't fit either.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think some side pieces on there too are the about a mismatch is that uh that metal doesn't have as many anthems as it used to, especially with extreme vocals, things like that.
Mhm.
You don't have a song with a memorable chorus. You don't have as many hooks.
Mhm.
You look at a lot of these, songs that got picked up for soundtracks, and it's because they had a really good musical hook in them, and then they had an identifiable chorus with, some kind of thing, like you were saying, the Guns N' Roses, "You Could Be Mine." It comes, that's a
It's a pop song.
identifiable thing. People are going to sing along with it.
Yeah.
And with that being less a part of the heavier genres and things now, I think that does kind of pull it down the ladder a bit. I think there's a secondary part of, again, metal not being seen as much as the, how can I say, what we've addressed before, that initially hip hop taking its crown to a big degree,
Mhm.
but it's just not as it's not the badass music anymore.
No.
People are screamy in it and stuff, but it's kind of like, okay, that's just weird, rather than, these guys are the real badasses. Uh, and yeah, I think there is a bit more of a movies taking themselves maybe a little too seriously or something like that in it. But like I see a movie like, or a movie series actually, like John Wick.
Yeah.
I'm like, how does this thing not have the most metal soundtrack in history? And made 15 years earlier, every soundtrack from John Wick would have been top to bottom. I guarantee it. Just metal bands, you know, uh,
Um, I'm
theme after theme.
I'm not convinced. I think purely because the film, of course, I understand it. It's supposed to be. I can't think of the right way to classify the film, but let's just call it a bit like a comic book movie in the way that physics and the reality sort of works, and that sort of world. It's not. It's obviously not the real world.
Hmm.
But I feel like it's a bit too dark. It's a similar visual style to The Matrix, and you're not getting these fun anthems. You're getting into these moody, brooding songs, like you had "Wake Up" on The Matrix. I feel like
Hmm.
John Wick would go more into that broody darkness.
Sure.
Um,
But you still have, you know, rockish metal type of stuff in there.
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't work with rap. You get away with dance, I presume.
Hmm. But yeah, it's really interesting, and but it did strike me that, you know, this used to be a big way for metal bands, that was one of their big avenues
Mm,
to, you know, get on a soundtrack, and you could break that way. Uh, and now with that not being as much, part of it has moved to, you know, video games. But again, the video games are using all established artists.
yeah,
You're not really hearing an up and coming being used in their work. It's all past things. So I think for metal bands coming up, that might be something to see if you can reinvent, and because it shows you the power of riding on other cultural events, that it can be incredibly powerful to what you're doing. And, you know, maybe seeking out filmmakers in your area, or amateur filmmakers. You know, it like everything you do doesn't have to be, you know, oh man, I'm in the new Mission Impossible movie or something. It's like, no, you're not at that level. But things like that, like finding opportunities for your music to be associated with or become part of a separate product.
yeah,
And I think trying to make that promotion can be a good thing. You know, giving your stuff out maybe to YouTube personalities who do kind of, who aren't musicians themselves or something, but do kind of edgy humor or something like that, and going, hey, I've got this song I think would be a great intro thing for you.
mhm,
License free, run with it. And, you know, get a placement in it that way. That could be, you know, kind of taking the same mentality and the same use of the current zeitgeist and riding on the wave of something. Because, you know, it seems like what used to be really a major outlet for metal bands to get discovered publicly has kind of dried up.
yeah. I totally agree, and I think leaning back on what I said, I think if you are a major film studio, you're gonna look at your catalog. You're not gonna look outside for new stuff. Why would you? When it all ties in together. But going back to what you said about seeking out small film companies, that's a great idea. And I feel like I don't want to be too I don't want to scrutinize certain artists, but I would imagine if I was a younger musician, I would kind of feel like I don't want to put my music on a film. I want to go out there and play it. But if you change your mindset and think about your music being a product, which many musicians don't want to when they first start out, if you're in the mindset that my music is a product, you would do well to find different vehicles or methods to get that product moving. So yeah, that's totally viable. And I can think of a great example of there's a podcast called, I'm pretty sure it's Reply All. There's some like dance EDM thing. I think his name was Breakmaster Cylinder, and he just sent them an intro, and they use it all the time. And like you said, like just royalty free, he uses it. The podcast uses it, and the song gets played all the time. So yeah, I mean, reach out, and I think maybe this is just the way that my imagination thinks about how the music industry works. But in the 80s and 90s, the records companies, their only viable means to find music was to send out A&R guys. Um, Now there's just so much music everywhere. They don't have time for that. So you need to make yourself known as a musician and reach out. And I think that's probably the better way to deal with it now. And we actually haven't spoken about, well, we spoke about selling the music as a product with the bun a little while ago, but more on that, yeah, like what other avenues can I use to sell my music? And I think I'm kind of speaking to myself. It's not defeatist to license your music to for anything else that isn't a CD, if that makes sense. Like it's still viable and successful.
Sure. I mean, it's you can't. It's the old thing about don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's
Mm,
like why it should only go this way, not that way. No, it should go all ways because you don't know which one is going to suddenly turn the key.
yeah.
And it's like any avenue that you can use, you just have to go balls out for promotion. If you're in a band and that's what, metal guys used to understand. I can remember uh it's absolutely hilarious if you want to look up on YouTube some early, especially like again what would be considered the glam era
Mm.
type of stuff in early 80s, bands doing like hair salon and hot dog stand commercials.
Right.
I'm not kidding. I think, and don't quote me on these, but I know that it's a variation of they're out there. There was a band, I think they were from Florida, called Nasty Savage, kind of a
Ah.
B-level metal band or something, and they totally did a song and showed themselves like arriving at this hair salon in a limo and having their music played in the background and everything. And I think my favorite of all time is the band Cinderella
Ah.
wrote a song called like Frank's Hot Dogs and literally are singing it in front of the hot dog stand. And it just anything they could do to get on there. And I think that level of hustle when it comes to just going like, any avenue, you never know what happens. Uh, or I think I remember like Flotsam and Jetsam on what over here used to be called public access TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, just this horrible thing. It looks like it was filmed but in the corner of a high school gym or something. Uh, all kinds of stuff like that. But they would just find any opening where they could get in and get their music parked on something. And yeah, like I said, I mean, you look at something like Stranger Things or any of those movies, and it's like all it takes is that to take off.
Yeah.
And you never know which one's going to do it. How many stories have you heard about Academy Award winning actors who read a script and went like, this is crap. And then it turns out to be one of the biggest blockbusters of all time and they passed on it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you have to go up to the roulette wheel and bet on everything. Uh,
What do you think is a good strategy for um approaching soundtracks if you wanted to? I mean, I kind of I've heard of both stories where a band is approached by, I don't know, a film company and they say, can you write us a song for the soundtrack? Or they say, can we use your existing song? So do you have any, I guess, any ideas for how to put yourself in that position of being asked? Or is it again just not putting all your eggs in one basket and making yourself known and in the scene, as it were?
I find the best way to get asked is to ask.
Yeah.
Um, you have to have something before people want something from you.
Yes.
So, well, like in my area, uh, there's actually, and again, it's why this town is so cool. Uh, there's a horror movie festival that
Oh,
goes
cool.
on every year, and they start reporting on it early. It's a smaller area, and they go like, oh, we're going to have entries from this guy again this year, and this film's being worked on, and stuff like that. I find out who they are every year.
Hmm.
And I look down the list and I look at their projects and I go, do I have something I think fits this?
Oh, cool.
and I just get their contact information, send them info. And the thing is, you have to have material ready though.
Yeah.
So I always have instrumental versions of, my songs, ambient things that I've done, stuff like that. And I'll go, here's a couple clips and samples of what I'm doing. I think your movie sounds interesting. If you think my stuff might be right for it, let's have a conversation. And I
Mhm.
send it to everyone on that list. And if you get a placement in there, everybody who's in that festival is watching each other's movies too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they hear something that sounds good, then they're going to go, man, that guy's soundtrack kicked mine's ass. Who did that? Or who was that song from? I really like that song. Or people at the theater might, go, that song they found is great. Who the hell is that band? So then by asking first, you get asked next time. Then you get
Yes.
the email, hey man, I heard the stuff you did in the Ghost of whatever movie. Are you open to doing another project? That type of thing. Or you start getting emails, hey, I found your band through the horror film festival or something. Do you have hard copies? Where can I find your stuff online? So, ask to get in the door somewhere, and then people will start asking you.
Mm. Networking 101.
Exactly. You have to announce your presence, and then, if people are into it, they'll come and find you. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about more specific examples and still on films. But like I said, it's with this being such a time-tested avenue that works good for promotion and works great for metal bands who usually don't get that exposure, I think focusing on that and going, what is my movie placement? It may not be in a movie. It's where can I find a place to ride, something else that's currently cool or going on.
Mhm.
You really have to get into this thing of promotion and entrepreneurship to the point of obsession sometimes when you're trying to really break out or get more fans because, we're a semi-closed environment.
Yeah.
We're not all over commercial radio. We're not in the biggest Spotify playlist, stuff like that. Uh, I can remember a lot of stories like, even like, not metal, obviously, but like Tom Petty, when he used to go on the road, supporting his first albums and he was really trying to break out. He's already signed to a label. He's already on a major tour, but whenever they stopped, the first thing he would do was get somebody to drive him to the local record stores.
Hmm.
And he would go in there and look for where the display with his album was.
Mhm.
And like he would make sure if it wasn't near the front, he would bring it up to the front. If his albums weren't the front in his letter category, he would make sure that they were in there. So, he would sit there and make sure that his commercial presence was, done every time. So, even though he had already established some things, the guy was on it,
Yeah.
all the time. When you walk into this record store, you are going to see me. Period. I am going to like this cutout of me holding my albums is going to be the first thing you see when you walk into this record store. So, he, and obviously, he had a fairly, somewhat small career.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting out and getting fans that matter and introducing yourself to people who you might not normally inside of your enclosed area be able to reach. Riding piggyback or getting those promotional pieces where you're able to catch people off guard. Crucial. And that's what, these soundtrack placements used to really be. So I think I think it's important that especially metal bands start trying to find out what especially is going to be that new avenue that works great. Try all of them, because you never know. I mean, Cinderella, Frank's Hot Dogs, that seemed to give them a couple platinum selling albums, so I can't point fingers.
No.
But yeah, I think it'll be interesting as this stuff kind of cycles out. And what I mean by cycling out is really, and I know, again, we keep referencing this impending conversation, but the stuff about streaming and downloading, and especially with the economy now and it being almost impossible for anybody without a massive budget to be able to tour and everything, getting and maintaining any kind of music as not just a career, but just something viable that you can do is becoming impossible.
Yeah.
So
consistently, yeah.
Yeah. So finding, as this kind of moves through, I think we're going to see a reshaping of things because it's collapsing. And as that collapse happens, it's like, what's going to become that new thing? Because I always find there's a certain way that stuff gets discovered that people kind of know outside of the usual, venues and stuff. Like if you're really into dance music, the clubs and especially the exclusive parties are where things happen because there's select DJs that are considered, the ones really in the know. And when you go, you get to hear the tracks they've picked and the artists that they think are cool. That type of thing. So, each place kind of has you're going to discover something here and there, and they found a way to piggyback. So it could be interesting, but like I said, it's a lesson that we're seeing a version of with the Stranger Things thing, but I don't think it's going to carry on like that because, like I said, as I've bitched 1,000 times, we're just recycling culture over and over with these mainstream things. And there's another shitty point I want to make after that. But so new bands aren't going to break through that way. We may hear metal and soundtracks and stuff, and that may come back, but it's not going to be the new stuff. And I think that shows a mentality too that people have to get into their heads. And that's that it shows where, the labels are and big management companies are the ones who get these placements done. Very rarely are you going to, get something placed outside of that. Although I do have one insider story that's pretty funny that I'll tell you about in a minute. So when you look at what's happening, like I said, you're talking about Last Action Hero, all this stuff, and established but also up and coming bands, and the things like Filter and Seven Dust and Atari Teenage Riot and all these bands I found out of because of soundtracks. Now those were put there because that's what a label brought to those filmmakers. Now everything you hear is old shit.
Yeah.
So it tells you something really blatant about the labels is they aren't doing and have no interest in doing what they used to, which was working with an artist to develop their career. They do not care about new artists. You have to be a moneymaker now. It's becoming an irony that it used to be a label saw someone that they thought was going to be a moneymaker. They, bet their chips on your horse. And even though they were pieces of crap and everything, you both kind of went like, all right, horse and rider, let's see what we can do with this. And then you had a couple albums and it was like, okay, you had your shot, shit's not working. Or by your third album, you started to really develop your sound and you had something going, and now, you know, things are picking up. They are not interested in that anymore.
No,
All they want to do is go, okay, this stuff has already made money for us. It's still making money for us. We want to make even more money with no effort. I mean, literally, it's no investment.
no,
It's
I
like,
know. Yeah.
okay, we already own this artist catalog. This is, if we get this placed in a movie, free money.
Yeah.
Don't have to pay the artist. Don't have to put them on the road. Don't have to finance a tour. Free money. So that's what those guys are taking to the filmmakers. They're not taking nails to them. They're not taking, night verses to them. They're not taking any of these, lesser known bands or something. They're taking them Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
They're taking them Metallica. It's like, just keep making money, not having to work.
Yeah. And I mean, that speaks to a wider problem in society about money just funneling upwards, but that's sort of out of our control. I want to go back to the point of horror movies. And I feel like there's a great relationship between metal and horror. It's just sort of almost the same iconography and symbolism and that kind of thing.
Sure.
And the more I think about it, the more I don't want to say lesser known bands, but the lower level bands are scattered throughout many. I don't want to say even B tier horror. It's just sort of anything that isn't mainstream horror. You'll find tons of different lower level bands on them. I had one on my mind now. I can't think of it, but that's where all of these cool breakout bands are. They're on these indie low level horror flicks, and I think that works. That even works for the aesthetic. Like you don't want to jump. Oh, well, okay. Financially, it'd be great to jump from zero to hero in one film, but you also have that like street cred of being in an independent film that's successful. Whatever, the next Rob Zombie horror film or whatever.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the problem with people. We're in the instant stardom culture now. It's like,
Oh yeah,
I'm going to make this viral video and it's going to explode and it's going to go crazy. So using that same mentality, they're like, well, I can't get my song in Lord of the Rings, or I can't, it's like, no, aim at a film that is at your band's level.
yeah.
Stop aiming way the hell out of your league. And then you keep moving up the ladder. It's it's almost hard to make the point that I just did about labels when bands won't do it for themselves either. It's like, yeah, the labels aren't developing them. It's like they're not developing them either.
No.
They go from one guy sitting in a bedroom with a laptop writing a whole album who's never played a show in his life to thinking all of a sudden I need to be on, a multi-million-dollar blockbuster film soundtrack. That's who he's putting his music forward on. It's like, dude, get a grip and, start putting in the time and making the push.
I really feel like I don't want to be disingenuous to the younger generation, but it does feel like the road is not as clear as it once was. And when you look at stuff like the 70s and the 80s and to a degree the 90s, it was pretty clear if you promote yourself hard enough and play enough shows, eventually someone will take notice. But these days, like I said, that doesn't happen, and you need to put in the legwork. And that comes down to getting out there and like you said, to meet other content creators, for lack of a better term, and say, I have a product that will suit you. And it's no different than any other product on the market. It's just that you're dealing with music. Um, Unfortunately, it, musicians now have to wear so many hats. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be a promoter, a business person, and all of these things. And it feels like there's less of an emphasis on the music now, and more of it being on a business. It kind of feels like, of course it can work, of course it can, but it feels like it takes away some of the magic. It's like you can see how the sausage is made.
Sure.
Um, and I can probably see that's the reason why people don't push it further than they want to, because they want to stay in the musical comfort.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, musicians hate doing business and stuff like that. And I'm going to probably round out today's conversation with one of my usual comments that we'll expound on in another episode. But I'll touch the fourth rail and piss some people off. Uh, I know what all our fans of Karl Marx and everything are probably sitting around right now. It's like, yeah, it is all business. Everything's capitalism. It's all about the business. Yeah. Hey, I know you're not used to having people attack you or criticize you, fans of the genre. But the reason that they have to turn everything into a business is because of you.
Mm.
So shut up. Okay. When you stop buying the music, when you only buy, bootleg merch off of eBay, when you wait for people to go to their shows so that you don't have to buy a ticket and then stream it on YouTube, when you do absolutely nothing to contribute to this artist's ability to deliver you this stuff, don't act like it's, the Rothschilds or something that are out there keeping these artists poor and unable to be heard. It's you.
Yeah.
It's you. You're the Rothschilds now. All the stuff you used to say it was so bad about labels, it's you.
The sad truth.
Yeah. So the reason that they have to find more and more promotions to find you, to bless them with your precious attention, is because they can't afford to throw themselves out there and just go balls to the wall at it. It's got to be run more and more business-like, and the music suffers because of it. So enjoy your product. I'm sorry, we don't make products anymore. We don't even make art. We make content. Are you enjoying the content? Consume the content, because next week we're adding more content.
I feel like it's a vicious circle, though. And of course, it's chicken and egg. The companies are giving the public what they want, and the public are consuming what the companies are giving them. But there has to be a stopgap somewhere. Somebody has to say, no, I'm not buying this. Or they're going to spend their money elsewhere and support an artist they do like. But yeah, I think
I'm
that
all good with that. Just support an artist somewhere.
Yeah, support someone directly and get rid of that middleman. That's how you fix it.
Mm-hmm.
On a lighter note, before we go, do you have a favorite original soundtrack?
Ooh. I don't know that it would be metal.
No, it doesn't have to be. Just your favorite soundtrack to a film.
I'm gonna have
mine
to.
Isn't.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a first and then a close second.
Yeah, go for it.
And this will be really ironic. Number one would have to be Bram Stoker's Dracula, the more recent one. The orchestral version by Wushak Kaliar. You listen to this thing and you realize that soundtracks for the past 25 years have all been ripping this soundtrack off.
Okay. I think I know what you mean. I haven't seen the film for a long time now, but is that the one with Gary Oldman?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. That does make sense.
Absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the second behind that would have to be both versions of the original Crow movie. One was the one with the more orchestral stuff on it, which was done by Graham Revell. and had very Eastern themes to it and stuff. Fantastic.
Mm.
And then there was also again, two different versions. That used to come out all the time too. You would get the film score and then you would get the film soundtrack. They
Oh,
were
right.
always, remember that stuff? It was like all the, the cues and the
Yeah.
orchestral music was on one album and then the rock songs were on another album. But the uh yeah, the one with the rock songs is great too. You had everything from Nine Inch Nails to The
Mhm.
Cure, to Stone Temple Pilots to Rollins to just tons of very cool songs on there and things that weren't just placements. That's what I liked about it. Some of them were, but like the Nine Inch Nails song was a cover of the song Dead Souls.
Mhm.
Yeah, the Cure song was an original one. Just good stuff. So that one's a bit nostalgic for me and stuff, but those two were just absolutely great ones. But my top one's got to be Coppola's Dracula. That
Oh, I
just,
need to see that again.
yeah, like I said, the soundtrack is just worth it listening to it. I used to listen to it constantly. It's just a masterpiece.
I'll pay attention to it next time because for me, I watch like YouTube videos about filmography and behind the scenes, and I watched Dracula several weeks ago, like behind the scenes, whatever. And so I'm familiar with some of the special effects they use, like the train and how he was floating and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But I can't remember the soundtrack, so I'm gonna have to definitely give that a listen.
And because I feel they're different, like so different, I have to give a tie for the number one thing. And also because I'm still bummed because he passed, but the Vangelis
Yeah.
score for Blade Runner.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So those are my picks. How about you?
This is gonna sound really weird, and it's not for the reason you might think so. My favorite soundtrack is the Scarface soundtrack. And
Hmm?
I know Scarface is loved by people in rap and that kind of thing. And I like the film. The film's fine. It's probably on my top 20 favorite films, sure. But I don't like the soundtrack because of Scarface. I just love the music. It's all synthwave. And it's just really happy songs against this neon environment of violence in the 80s. I don't know. I love the soundtrack. It's just this. It seems nostalgic for me for an era that I didn't grow up in. Pop songs, dance and disco and 80s disco. I don't know. It's just it's fun and I like it. Completely strange. I don't know why. Oh, and I think for me, like the nostalgia part was um on Grand Theft Auto. I don't know how familiar you are with the games, but Grand Theft Auto 3 on the radio station, they have Flashback FM. And Flashback FM is basically the soundtrack to Scarface. So it just sort of another layer of nostalgia for me, being a kid playing GTA and just hearing these songs, and I don't know, it just makes me feel warm and fuzzy.
Hmm. Okay.
I think you'll like it. I mean, you like synthwave stuff. It's obviously not John Carpenter kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's a lot more poppy. But the pop songs, if you're in a poppy mood, it works out pretty well.
Yeah, very cool.
So that's my pick. I can't think of. Probably like Pulp Fiction soundtrack and Reservoir Dogs soundtrack. They come to my Terminator. Terminator's a good soundtrack. The first one.
Sure. Sure.
Oh, what's his name? I can't remember his name now. Oh shit. Anyway, yeah, all of the keyboard stuff that he makes, that's pretty awesome.
Hmm.
And that'll do it from me.
All right. I'm definitely curious about what soundtracks people have liked and, what songs or bands or things like that they may have discovered through it. So drop us a line in the comments on the YouTube and other platforms. And if you're checking us out on one of the streaming platforms, please leave a good review. So, it helps us get the episodes out and things. They promote things that get the better reviews, and there's definitely more to come.
Absolutely.
Right, so with that, we will wrap up. As always, I am one half of your host, Rodney McGee. You can find me on YouTube at Rodney McGee. I know that's a tough one. Uh, but there, and of course at Rodney and Alfie Talk Metal if you're watching the video version.
And you can find me, Alfie Williams, also on YouTube by typing in Witch Bass. And that's where I live. That's where I'm on the internet. So I'll see you guys there.
Take it easy. We'll see you on the next one.
See you later.